Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History. There's not too many things that historians tend to agree upon, but there might be one, that the Treaty of Versailles sucked. So in this lecture, we're going to frame it out, we're going to chop it up, and we're going to serve it up on a bed of learning. So let's go get her done right now. So let's start with the big idea first. The big idea is that the Treaty of Versailles, which is the treaty with Germany at the end of World War I at the Paris Peace Conference, is going to severely punish Germany. Bang! Like, after they lost, they're going to lose big time. We're going to punch them in the face like 1,000 times. First, they're going to take guilt. We're going to take their land away. We're going to make them pay. We're going to make their army like this big. And really, we're going to, in a sense, punish them so harshly that Adolf Hitler is going to be able to use that energy and that sense of German nationalism and pride to really use that to, rise himself to power and really start World War II. So a lot of historians would point to the fact that the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war with Germany at the end of World War I, is really one of the direct causes for World War II. So now that you can hang your hat on a big idea, let's backdrop a little bit and then take a look at the treaty. Of course, you know Armistice Day. All school children know Armistice Day, and of course, Armistice Day is the beginning of the peace at the end of World War I. At least the fighting stops. That's November 11th, 1918. The Treaty of Versailles, which is specifically with the Allied powers and Germany, isn't going to go into effect until June 1919. That's more than 6 months after the fighting stopped. So it's a rather lengthy conference to nail down these points of peace, I guess that's what you would say. And it's actually 5 years to the day that Archduke Ferdinand was shot, which started World War I. So 5 years after World War I starts, it's kind of officially over, at least with Germany, with the Treaty of Versailles. So it's going to be the big three that are really going to dictate the terms of this treaty. Russia signed a treaty with Germany in 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which really gave lots of land to Germany. About 1/3 of Russia was given over, about 3/4 of their factories and their railroads. About 20 million people ended up in German hands. So the Russians aren't really part of this process anymore. And Germany is certainly not going to be let into the door. And them not being part of this process is going to be part of the anger that they feel. You know, they might primarily be responsible for World War I, but there's some other actors as well. Austria had a big part of this. Russia had a humongous part of this. And France certainly was ready to be mobilized for war in order to garner some of the land they lost in the 19th century. So there's a lot of blame to go around. But Germany, they're not going to be let into negotiations. The big three, of course, are going to be Woodrow Wilson with his 14 points coming across the Atlantic Ocean. Why did I do a British accent? From the United States, we have George Clemenceau from France, and he's probably the angriest of the bunch. You have to remember that France shares a border with Germany. Most of the Western Front is fought in France. They lost like 1/5 of their adult male population. They're really angry. They don't want to be invaded anymore. And you have David Lloyd George from the UK, the Prime Minister, and he's really looking for more of a safe peace. They have a huge economic investment in Germany as a trading partner. He wants things to kind of go back to the way they were, but at the same time, we don't want this to happen again. And then you have the big bubble boy living in the bubble of idealism, Woodrow Wilson, coming from the United States, the Democratic president with his 14 points. And it's just a real partisan effort on Woodrow Wilson's part. There are no Republicans in his posse that go over to the Paris Peace Conference, and that's going to probably be one of his problems down the road when he needs Republican support from Henry Cabot Lodge in the Senate in order to get the Treaty of Versailles ratified in the United States. But you can see that these three guys have different objectives going in, but they're in control of this ball game, and they're going to dictate the terms. There was a time, really, where the Germans were thinking about, nixing this treaty, not signing it, and seeing if they could fight off a land invasion. But at the end of the day, they're just too weak, and they're going to be forced to have to sign it. And of course, like we said before, that German anger is going to result in one Adolf Hitler. I would put a side note, because there are some historians that point out, with the rise of fascism and Mussolini in Italy, who was part of, our Allied powers in World War I, and they still had a problem with fascism and Mussolini. But at the end of the day, the treaty is still really, really harsh. So let's take a look at some of the different terms of the treaty, and then we'll see if we can wrap this up. We'll wrap it up. Article 231, write that down. If you're doing an essay, you got to put Article 231, because that's the guilt clause. That's the part of the Treaty of Versailles with Germany that says you're bad. You're the one who did it. You're the one who started it. It's all your darn fault. And that war guilt is really going to be a slight at a sense of German nationalism, which is really strong. They're really going to be angry about this. And again, we're going to keep saying it, Adolf Hitler. He's going to be the one that's going to be able to tap into that energy of the German people to bring himself to power in the 1930s. Number 2 on the list is loss of territory. They already are going to lose all that territory that they had gained with the treaty with Russia. That's going to be really going to be, going to Poland. But they're also going to lose about 25,000 square miles, the majority of that being ceded to Poland and some of that going to France. And we're going to talk about the demilitarization zone that goes on in the Rhineland. But France, they wanted either their borders to go all the way to the Rhine, or they at least wanted a new buffer state between them and Germany. But they are going to get demilitarization of the Rhine land, something like 30 or 40 miles east into Germany. And they're also going to acquire some mineral-rich land in western Germany that's going to be ceded to France. The League of Nations colonial mandates. We'll talk about the League of Nations in a few minutes here, but there are going to be colonial mandates which are going to force Germany to basically give up their sovereignty over these colonies that they have around the world. They have colonies in Africa, they have colonies in the West Indies, they have colonies all over the place. So they're going to be split up, and guess who's going to get them? The majority is going to go to France, it's going to go to Belgium, it's going to go to Japan, who is another ally there. So they're basically going to take some of the prized possessions of Germany away, and again, the Germans are like, oh, we're really angry. And Adolf Hitler's going to be like, yeah, follow me. So military restrictions is a huge deal. We're going to make their army so small, you're going to have to do this. Just look at it. It's going to be so tiny. They actually capped the army at 100,000 men. The Navy severely limited. No more submarines, no Air Force, no planes, no arms trading, no conscription. And we're also going to basically create a buffer about 30, 40 miles east of the Rhineland where we're going to actually occupy that part of Germany for about 15 years to make sure that they're going to pay the reparations, which we're going to talk about in a second, and they're going to keep this demilitarization thing going. But again, the German sense of nationalism, that love of their militarism, remember, Bismarck and all this kind of jazz, Hitler's going to tap into that energy. Every time I say Hitler, drink, unless you're a kid, then you got to have like a milkshake or something. I'm going to say it a lot. War reparations. We've probably all seen these kind of films of little kids with wheelbarrows filled with money going to buy bread because of the war reparations that were put on the back of the German people. In today's dollars, it's about $500 billion, about $500 billion. The Germans actually only paid back about $50 billion of that, and a lot of that was through the printing of money, which created that hyper-superinflation that made bread worth a wheelbarrow of money. But they did take about $20 billion in real money, like gold and assets, right away in order to pay for that occupation in the demilitarized zone in the Rhineland and to pay back some of the costs that the Allied powers had spent fighting this war with Germany. But again, that economic depression that occurs and the blame that goes on, we haven't talked about the blame that Adolf Hitler is specifically going to put on the Jews that live in Germany, but that's definitely going to happen in relation to them not winning World War I. The strikes that went on were blamed on the Jews, and the economy was blamed on the Jews as well. And again, you know how that works. Hitler's going to use that. He's going to rise to power. He's going to go to World War II. I'm done saying it. I'm done saying it. So the last thing that we'll talk about is actually part 1 of the Treaty of Versailles. It was part of all of the treaties signed at the end of World War I, which is the creation of the League of Nations. And it's quite ironic because Woodrow Wilson, who invented the idea of the League of Nations, kind of United Nations body that would solve world problems to avoid going into something like World War I again, is going to be really the linchpin that is going to get the Germans to sign that treaty. The Germans had signed the armistice on the concept of the 14 points, that this would be a peaceful peace, that they'd be able to regain some type of autonomy and power in their country. And of course, we've talked about all these ways that we're socking it to them, we're punching them in the face. So the Treaty of Versailles is like the one piece of hope, right? The Germans will belong to this, that they'll be able to regain their sense of dignity, honor, nationalism, and the League of Nations will be this fair entity that will be able to take care of Germany and the rest of the world as well. And of course, that's not going to happen when Woodrow Wilson brings that Treaty of Versailles back to the United States Senate. You remember American politics, he needs 2/3 of a majority of the Senate to ratify that treaty, and it was a partisan effort. There were no Republicans over in the land of Paris when this was going on. So there's a lot of fear that specifically Article Article 10 of the League of Nations Charter, which basically would say that the League of Nations could bring the United States into a war without congressional approval, is going to be a non-starter. But mostly Republicans, they're going to say, no way are we going to give up our autonomy of our self-interest to these European war fighters. That's just silly. So Woodrow Wilson, who came up with the League of Nations, and the League of Nations goes into the Treaty of Versailles, and the Germans are all excited about it. Now the United States, probably the premier world power after World War I, is not going to be a part of it, and that is going to be one of the big reasons it's going to fail. And again, Adolf Hitler is going to rise to power and take us into World War II. Ha! So what do you know? We grew your brain. We prepared you for the test. We prepared you for life. Giddy up for the learning. If you haven't subscribed to HipHughes History, it's fun, it's funky, it's fast, and of course it's free. All you gotta do is click the red button right there and hook a brother up. I always say, guys, where attention goes, energy flows. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time that you press my buttons.